Welcome back to Happiness Habitat. I'm Jacqlyn Burnett. Joined today, I have a very special guest, Dr. Andrea Echeverry. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for the invitation, Jacqlyn. How's everybody doing?
So great. And I'm so excited for this conversation because we're going to be talking about something that quite a few people actually think about at some point in their life, which is scalp health. And that's something that you've dedicated your life to actually studying. And I would love if you could just kind of start out by telling me a little bit what you do and how you got into this practice.
Thank you, of course. So my background is initially as a researcher. So I got a PhD in microbiology and immunology from the University of Miami. But I realized when I finished my career that I did not want to really continue in academia. So I became independent. And about 10 years ago, after a brief time being a business owner in a completely unrelated field, I found, well, it was actually my ex-husband at the time, who was my business partner. We found scalp micropigmentation, which is a treatment that is done to restore the front line of a man who has lost all the hair and is already shaving. And it's basically permanent makeup. It's a form of tattooing. And so I was one of the first in the world to learn how to do the technique correctly. And because I live in Florida, we had no competition. We set up shop. And that's basically how I started in the hair loss space. I started working with completely bald heads. So little by little, I realized that a lot of the clients who were looking for the service were not really good candidates for it. Why? Because micropigmentation requires a microneedle to go in between the existing structures of the scalp, whether it's a hair follicle that's still creating hair or a sebaceous gland that has no hair anymore, but it's there. I can't really put a needle through that. So you need some space. And unfortunately, I found that at least 50 to 80% of clients were not good candidates for it. And they had the potential to regrow their hair. But I had no formal training at the time as a trichologist or as a dermatologist, because I'm a PhD, I'm a researcher, not a medical doctor. And so I started from a fresh canvas in the field, and I realized that there were so many misconceptions and dogmas. And in hair loss, there were like these block boxes, right? Like people looking for the service of hair regrowth. First, they didn't even know that it was possible. They thought, I'm losing my hair. There is no way to get it back. And I found that it wasn't the case if I applied multiple different techniques. And one of them, the most important one, was trying to restore the scalp microbiome. So the problem is that I am trying to address an issue that is invisible. We can't really see it with the naked eye. Even with a microscope, it's not a great enough magnification. And so many times I found that if we started using a microscope, yes, we could find specific features. And if I control those features, which in principle we were controlling in a way, an imbalanced microbiome, then the person would start growing hair. And of course, that was at least the basis of my practice. And little by little, I started adding additional processes to that to make it happen much quicker. And so many people who come to me, or at least back in the day, they would look for a specific service, right? They would look for PRP, for example, and I would be like, PRP doesn't really work 100% of the time. You're going to spend a lot of money for something that we don't know that is going to work. How about I take you on this path, which may be faster, but it's going to require you to pay attention to pretty much everything that you do in life. The focus is going to go from your business or from other things to yourself, your diet, frequency of exercising, how they're grooming, and the emotional component. And so I basically became an integrative doctor with a focus on trichology. So that's basically where I am right now after a decade. And now 80% of my clientele really comes to me for hair regrowth services. I do use scalp micropigmentation as a technique to help the person feel much more comfortable. But many times when I do the service and the hair grows, then the tattoo is not visible anymore, but we were able to get the person from point A to point B a lot faster because they're feeling more comfortable and they're going to adhere to the practices that I'm going to suggest.
Wow, that's amazing.
Thank you.
What a beautiful journey that you've experienced and actually found through this story of, just trying to help people. And then now you actually really get to help people in a whole new way. What are some of the misconceptions that, men have? Because I know you were saying that you actually do treat more of these men. Like, what are some of the misconceptions about just the scalp microbiome and how can us, just a lay person,
one of the major
kind of work towards
misconceptions has to do with this idea, and there's a little bit of research behind it. It's not the greatest research, to be honest with you, that every form of hair loss is driven by an increased level of dihydrotestosterone, so being hormonal, or this idea that it's called androgenetic alopecia, that you're losing hair because of your genetics. And because I'm a scientist, I'm a biologist, I have such an integrative background, I realized that wasn't the case. I would say at least 80% of people who think that they have a genetic predisposition to hair loss, that component may be there, but it's very minor. It's the other things that they're doing that is causing some issues. For men, what I find is
Wow.
and this is, to be honest with you, it's a point of friction with many other doctors. But I know from experience and from the true research on dihydrotestosterone that it's misplacing people's focus and taking them on a much longer road, because there is a commercially available product, right, that people can take orally or topically. And in most cases, it doesn't work. And so when people exhaust that avenue and they can't grow their hair, they go, oh, there's nothing else that I can do. What people don't realize is that hair is excess tissue. This is excess. It's going to come from the excess food and nutrients that you consume. And so I focus, since my practice has been primarily with men, the majority of them were bodybuilders, or they were training in the gym as if they were professionals, but they were missing one of the most important components in bodybuilding, right? If you're lifting weights, you have to eat more. So the first thing that most guys do is they start training more and eating less. You can't do that. And so it happens very quickly, between 3 to 6 months after a man starts in that journey of growing muscles, their hair is going to thin out. And the other thing that they do is they start shampooing because they're sweating. So my focus has been on identifying what is like the simplest way for most people to acquire the physical composition that they want, not prevent them from reaching that goal, but at the same time, teaching them the misconceptions of bodybuilding. What it really is necessary for you to see a six-pack, to see, gain 10, 20, 30 pounds in general, without affecting the ability of the body to make hair. And so I think that I am the only person in the world who applies body composition analysis as the center point of their practice. Everybody else is going for what's going on the scalp. Well, that's a component for me too, but the main one is, well, let me see where your composition is right now. And let's see if we can align your goal with what you see in the mirror. Many people think that they actually are much more over fat than they are. They, with body dysmorphic disorder and all of this stuff that's going on online, where people see this perfection, right, going on. They want to emulate that, and they don't realize how perfect they actually are already. Many people see themselves as being obese when they actually are not obese, quite the opposite. Right? They've been on a calorie restriction for such a long time, and they've been training so hard for so long that they don't realize, well, you may need to start eating a lot more, but can your digestive system even handle that amount of food? And so it's, it's a long path, but it clicks with people. They realize yeah, you're right. I've been doing this for 5 years and I don't see the gains that I want to see. And I'm coming to you for my hair. And now you're talking about my training and how I shower. Like, this makes a lot of sense. So once it clicks in a person's head, it's very easy for them to adhere to what they need to do. And what they learn with me are things that they will be applying for the rest of their lives, not just for hair growth, but for everything else that's going to happen in their lives.
So epic. So talking about that, how does a scalp microbiome interact with the other microbiomes in the body, right? Because if you're looking at the other part of the body as well, like inside, how is that all interconnected? Or do you also look at that, like the gut microbiome and other?
Absolutely.
Microbiomes?
So I'm not a big proponent in actually testing to see what is the microbiome composition, especially because gut microbiome is the one that has the longest track record for research. It's at least a good 30 years, with the last 15 years being the strongest for gut microbiome. We have very specific telltale signs that your internal microbiome is not working correctly. But in order for the internal microbiome to really work the way that it should, well, that is what food is for. People think of food only as nutrients for the body. They don't realize the food that you're eating is also supporting the microbiome, which we consider to actually be a genetic component for you, right? We need that microbiome because they bring all of the other genes that are going to allow the food that you can digest to be processed. And as a good side effect, that's why we call the bacteria in the intestine commensals. They're not going to be damaging to you. They're going to use the nutrients that you provided, and as a thank you or as an exchange for the good food that you provide, they're going to be metabolized, are going to be good for your mental health, for your digestion, and for longevity in general, right? And they're going to be able to process food that normally without the microbiome, it doesn't work. And so normally, yes, when people experience hair loss, there is a breakdown in both of the components. That is my job, is to identify, okay, how much focus do we need to place on the scalp microbiome versus the internal, right? So the scalp microbiome is very complex in a sense, different to the gut microbiome, because it's part of the skin itself. The entire length of the skin is a biofilm. The microbiome in the gut is different. We have a single layer of epithelial cells, a mucus layer, and then we have the microbiome sitting right on the outside as a biofilm. And so in some ways, right, the microbiome does its job because it's not stimulating the immune system. In the skin, the microbiome is part of what controls the immune system directly. In fact, it's always dampening the response, right? The populations are very diverse and very different. Why? Because even though the skin and the scalp is an organ and it's interconnected and it has a very large surface area, the diversity of the skin microbiome, as we understand it now, is much less diverse than the gut, okay? So that is the reason why I find that modulating the scalp microbiome, sometimes it's a lot faster to be able to see results because we're working right in that area. The hair follicle lives within the biofilm, right? So you have your own human cells, but then you have all of the other microbiota, right? The bacteria, the viruses, the fungi that are working together with your own human cells, right? And so that is the reason why it can be so potent when you start targeting the scalp microbiome directly. Gut microbiome dysfunction takes a long time to happen. Some people, especially now the new generations, because of the foods that we have, the toxicity that we receive through the food, gets disrupted very early on in life. And so we actually see now more cases of hair loss in young people because of dysfunction of the gut microbiome than the scalp microbiome.
So I would love to learn from you. What are some of the key factors or key things that people can do to support and influence a healthy scalp microbiome?
Okay. So the populations of microbes that live on the surface of the scalp tend to be very sensitive to detergents. And that kind of makes sense because if you think of human evolution, we were not born and we did not evolve with a little bottle of shampoo or soap, right? That makes sense. We're thinking, right?
Yes.
Soaps, right? Like the need and the want to feel comfortable and smell good. It's actually a very modern thing. That's because many of the ancient civilizations, we don't know a lot because there's records that have been destroyed, but we have always gravitated towards water, right? We need to be around water because we need it for so many different things. And so having really clean, a toxin-free quality water is the first one. And again, we're talking about two different layers. So the first one is the one that's always in contact with the environment. That's going to be what's going to come in contact with water and what comes in contact with detergent. And so minimizing detergent or learning to feel clean without detergent is the most important one. Detergents have existed for thousands of years. In fact, the Greeks kind of perfected how to make a saponin or a detergent based out of oil from animal oils, right? So that was already perfected, and we have been using that for a long time. That's basically what Castile soap is. So ancient, right? We're talking thousands of years. But the new detergents that have come up in the market that are really destroying the microbiome are only about 50 years old, maybe 65. And we never came in contact with any of this. And so because the microbiome is so sensitive to it, kind of understanding, oh, wait, right. Because, kids now, they want all these soaps and all this, and there's all this marketing, right, towards kids. Like they have to have their body soap and their shampoo and foaming, right? It's like this image of lots of foam. Sudsing is the worst thing for the microbiome because it kills it off. In fact, in the lab, how do we break up cells super quickly? With some of the detergents that are used as preservatives in almost every single cosmetic that we find. Right. And so we are using something that is, we use it, think about it, the bottle, in order for it to last years in a shelf, to be shelf stable, has to have a preservative. Well, that preservative is going to be good to keep the product intact, but the moment that it comes in contact with the skin, boom, it's going to deplete it. So first you have your barrier. You have to maintain that barrier healthy. Water and less soap. So that's a water filter or living in an area that has high quality water, and then minimizing soap as much as possible. Then the next layer comes in, which is the internal one, okay? So we need to have good blood flow to the surface of the scalp. We do require some antioxidants for this to happen and some amino acids for this to happen. And so the main ones that I like to focus on are arginine and nitric oxide, which belong to exactly the same pathway. Why? Because nitric oxide is going to allow a lot of vasodilation. So we're going to have blood flow, right? And that's going to be able to allow the other functions. So you have the oxygenation, you have removal of toxins, right? Because you have blood flow, and then you have lymphatic drainage. In order for that to happen, so if we think of arginine, okay, where do we get arginine from? Animal products. This is one of the reasons why it's very difficult for a person who is a vegan to have really healthy hair. And in fact, if there's anybody in the audience who is a vegan and has been a vegan for some time and has beautiful, luscious hair, please let me know, because I haven't met the first vegan, okay? Now, vegetarians, it's a little more flexible, but still very unlikely that they're going to have super healthy hair. The next one will be pescatarians, right? So they do consume fish and eggs. That combination is going to give you at least a little bit of support that's going to allow that to happen. So I work with a lot of young people who went the vegetarian pathway 3, 4, 5 years. I mean, and I commend them, like, how do you stick to it? And then, they start reintegrating. And the first thing that they try to reintegrate is eggs, right? Because it's more palatable. It's a little easier. They don't have to go directly into eating red meat. And right away, they feel better and the hair starts to look better. But the problem is that by then, you may need 1, 2, or 3 years to get back to where you were before. And in many cases, the nutritional deficiencies of these very restrictive diets can be, I'm not going to say impossible to revert, but you might be looking at a 5-year process to get to that point, which is the reason why we have now many brands that can bring those nutrients to the surface of the scalp. You're going to spend a lot of money doing it that way. Most of the bottles are going to make $30 to $50. It's an expensive process. It does exist. So, if you can't receive all your nutrients through the food that you consume, well, we at least have options, sprays and different things that we can apply. So that really is the basis, to be honest. This is the reason why I said, in the previous comment that normalizing scalp microbiome versus gut microbiome is different. Much more difficult to reset the gut microbiome, little bit easier to reset because we have now tools that we didn't have 10 years ago. So that's a benefit.
That's
a benefit to all of us, which is the reason why my original PhD was actually studying the interaction of a human pathogen with the immune system of developing. I was working with mice. And so my focus was always gut microbiome, but I noticed that I think we're going to hit a point where we're not going to really make any more strides. And so I switched to skin microbiome, which the number of companies and the number of venture company funding that is happening is very limited. And so we have to support the brands that do exist that are focusing on microbiome health, especially skin. Some of the biggest names in the industry, I'm not gonna say them, they're getting in. It's been 2 to 3 years, but it's really a buzzword, unfortunately. When you look at the position of the things that they're saying that they're microbiome friendly or that they support the microbiome, they really are not. They're just using the buzzword microbiome. And so that's the reason why, it's good for somebody who's been in the space for such a long time and who's connected to people who are striving very hard to really get to the bottom of it, to stick around. You know what I mean? Like, do not believe something just because it says microbiome on the bottom. It's
classic marketing.
It's clever. I knew it was going to happen. It's marketing after all. And people are like, oh, yeah, this is good for the microbiome. And when you look at the composition, it's like, okay, they've made some changes, but it's not going to be sufficient for the product to really do what it needs to do. They're just keeping you in the loop. A year from now, it'll be something else. 2 years from now, another buzzword. They're just keeping us in this little, materialistic, consumeristic wheel. Like I said, it's very simplistic, right? So shower filter and not using as much soap. Okay, that helps. And then switching to some of the methods that have been with us for thousands of years. Everything that we had available in nature, we can buy it and support those mechanisms rather than buying a bottle of shampoo that has 85% water, plastic on the outside that's going to get you exposed to forever chemicals. No. Right. People don't realize I am paying, maybe $9, $10, $20 for a bottle of water. It's really water. You're paying for very, very overpriced water. And so
I'm paying for very overpriced water right now.
So that's why the brands that I support, when you're paying $35 for a bottle of product, it's going to have such little amount. You have to learn how to use it. So I will be posting, of course, some videos. I already have the majority of the material, just I'm trying to perfect it a little bit just to make it clear of how much product really needs to be used. And you can make a bottle last 2-3 months if you use it correctly because it's so concentrated. You can be paying more, but if you use it correctly and use the right amount, it's going to last you a lot longer.
So great. So for those products that are out there, because it's just, that's the easiest place to start, right? Like, as you mentioned, good water, a little bit of soap. And that's the easiest thing for people to grab. Okay, the soap, let's hardly use it. But when they're actually looking to choose the soap that they're going to put on their scalp, you know, a lot of people now are aware, okay, let's go sulfate and sulfur free. Yeah. How can you, is that the only thing really to look out for? Like, what about alcohol or other things that are in the product?
No, that's exactly right. So the one thing that has been reintroduced, unfortunately, is parabens, the 3 forms of parabens. They've been reintroduced. They were removed about 10 years ago, but unfortunately, they're very good antifungals. And so it keeps the product intact. Because, of course, if you have a combination of ingredients, doesn't have a preservative or high enough preservative, microbes are going to thrive in that bottle, and then you're going to put it on you, right? So they've been reintroduced, unfortunately. Fragrance, that is a big point, okay? Unfortunately, most fragrance, because it's not something, ingredients are not really regulated. Whatever goes in the bottle, nobody's overseeing that, okay? If you think that the FDA or any of the other, they're not looking out for you, especially in the US. The European, Korean, and Japanese markets are a lot more strict. And so I do favor a lot of brands that are not made in the US for that reason, but we do have a few. And so,
awesome.
Right, so we have to remove preservatives, we have to remove fragrance as much as possible, which means, in fact, I saw somebody at Aldi, I was doing a little shopping, and she picked a bottle. I almost took a video because this is how people purchase their products, based on how they smell. They don't do what I do, which is turn the bottle and read every single ingredient, right? And then go to the WG site and go, okay, right? And then look for an ingredient. It takes me forever to buy something. The same for you, right?
Yes, I'm the weirdo standing in the store for 20 minutes looking at the same product.
You know what she did? It took her 5 seconds to make a decision. She opened it and she went like this. She smelled it and she's like, okay, put it in her cart. That's it. So you have to, nobody has to be a chemist. That's not what we're saying. We have resources. You know, there's websites where you can plug in the name of a product and it's going to tell you, it has this ingredient, it has this one or this one. You can avoid them. So in principle, you have to look for formulations that are very simple. The ones that I use that I have found, the most complex ones are going to have 15 ingredients, which is a lot. But some of the best products for the Scalp Microbiome are going to have 5. We're looking to 3 to 5 ingredients.
Wow.
Correct. They're not going to work the way that you're used to. That, like something that creates a lot of suds. No. That's the difference between a shampoo and a hair wash. A hair wash is going to be almost like a conditioner that cleans. And so the problem is that people are like, you know, going through half the bottle trying to create suds. And I'm like, no, that's not how it's used. Like, no wonder you, wait, 2 weeks later, you don't have more product. I'm like, no. So I have to demonstrate how to use the product. That's the reason why people ask me, what shampoo do you recommend? I'm like, well, don't recommend shampoos. I recommend hair washes, but I have to show you how to use it. Otherwise, you're going to be like, what the hell did she give me this recommendation for? I don't see any. Right. It's very tricky. We have to engage in a re-education process. Otherwise, most of these brands that are supporting the microbiome, they're not going to have any traction, unfortunately, because people are not used to seeing the product that way, maybe spending that much more. They're not understanding. And also the amount of money that has gone into producing a product like that. We're talking from R&D to the final stage. It's millions of dollars for some of these companies. A lot of it's self-funded by researchers like myself. And so it's good to be mindful of that. Who are you supporting? Who are you giving your dollars to, right? Are you supporting the large corporations that don't really care, right? Because they have you on the hook, right? There's one brand that starts with N that has had people on the hook for 30 years. Horrible formulations, but it's still there. Like I said, I'm not going to say names. And that's what people bring. I'm like, bring me your products. And there's always at least one bottle from that brand because they think that is good and they continue using it. And so you're using all the resources that we have available and just backing out. Like if you don't know what to buy, don't buy something new, right? Follow me so that we don't, we're not advertising on the podcast right now, but follow me so I can give you some very objective recommendations, and I'll give you the pros and the cons, and then you can make a decision. I'm not going to tell you buy this one. I'm going to tell you this is why I like this one. These are the cases. But the more people that use the product, the more that we know who does it really benefit. So in principle, I am asking people to become citizen scientists, right? You don't have to be part of a lab. You don't have to be a doctor. You are in principle a scientist by choosing what you bring into your bathroom, because you're going to let us know when you find reviews. In fact, I love going through reviews of products for that reason. I want to know who had a negative reaction, who didn't like a product, why didn't they like it, right? So I understand, okay, maybe it's because in most cases, they didn't know how to use it because they had an expectation based on their previous experience with other products. Not because the product doesn't work or it doesn't do what it needs to do.
I feel like we're debunking so much right now, and I'm just so blown away and so grateful for all this information. There's something else that I kind of want to debunk with you, and that is supplements.
Yes.
Supplements such as, I mean, I could name, there's Viviscal, there's Harriman, there's all these different vitamins that have biotin, and even Viviscal has what they call, I think there's some type of fish or something in there.
Right.
Do those support, like, tell me about this. Like, should we be doing that?
So, because I do favor, we all have to eat. And so if we can receive that nutrition through the food, right, where you actually become replete in some of those nutrients, most people are not going to need supplementation. However, who needs supplementation? Those who already have an underlying medical condition that prevents them from absorbing nutrients. Those are going to be people who are already on medication. If you are on 1, 2, or 3 medications, you're going to need to supplement. Why? Because that oral medication is depleting the ability of your body to absorb the fatty acids, the B complex vitamins, CoQ10, so many other things that you're gonna require to have really healthy skin and hair. So there is a need for supplementation. Now, if you go to a nutrition store or any of the big name stores and you pick up a bottle of supplementation for $9, $10, $12, because that's what you can afford, you actually may be causing more damage. One, there's a reason why that supplement is costing $8 to $12. Let's start there. One, the concentration isn't high enough to really make an impact. Two, you're going to be getting excipients that are not necessary. And a lot of people take it on a daily basis. And if you don't have the discipline, if you buy something and you don't have the discipline to do it, as indicated, every day, 2 to 3 capsules, and you can't afford it, then you're going in the wrong direction. In fact, a lot of the supplementation that I use for some clients who need a little bit of that nutritional support are in the nutraceutical range. What that means is that they're not labeled as a drug, but they almost act like as a drug because of the concentration, because of the source, and the way that it's put together. Now, there's price ranges, right? Then we're going into supplementation that's going to be in the $25 to $60 range for 1 month. So is that really the first step that you need to take if you're not eating at all day, and when you do eat, it's out of a plastic bag? It's not going to do anything because you need macronutrients. This is a macronutrient transforming to a fiber. You need good protein, you need good fats, and you need the calories to give the body the energy for the machinery to work. And so focus on food first. And food is becoming so expensive that you have to make sure that you know where you put your dollars to work. And so sometimes introducing simple things into your diet and just being a little more diverse into what you eat is going to be much more beneficial than supplements. Supplements do work for the right person, depending on what they cannot get through food. So I'm not going to say that we don't use supplementation. I use it, but it's not the first thing that I do. That's almost like the third step, right? First group,
Makes sense.
then food, and then, okay, we have these deficiencies. You can't digest certain things, or you can't adhere to a certain protocol in terms of food. Then, okay, we're going to introduce this and this one. Can you stick to it for life? Because sometimes it's for life. You know, I find many clients that have chronic vitamin D deficiencies where they have to take vitamin D on a daily level, on a daily basis. Otherwise, the levels never get to the optimal range. So if you need to take vitamin D on a daily basis because you have some kind of mutation that prevents you from really being able to utilize vitamin D correctly, we see a lot of vitamin D receptor issues, then so be it, right? People that have mutations in pathways are necessary for B12, B6, B5, right? Folic acid. So those are people that have mutations in the MHTFR gene. You're going to need to supplement. It's going to be much more difficult for you to just get everything from food. And so that's why working with a professional can help so much. It's going to save a lot of time and a lot of money rather than trying to figure everything out on your own.
Yeah, I think it's so, you brought up such a good point. I think it's so important for humans as we live through this life in a physical body to really understand their body. Where are their levels? How are they taking care of themselves? I'm actually doing a lab test to test 100,000 different biomarkers in the body, and then work with a doctor who's actually going to look at that and tell me what that means and where am I deficient. And myself, I've gone through my own hair trauma, hair journey, and it's just, there's, your hair, everything on the body is a reflection of the health that's going on inside. Yeah. And so it's so important to really look at that.
Exactly.
I want to ask too, how do you see this field, microbiome health, your scalp health, how do you see this research evolving in the future?
So a lot of the people who have been working exclusively in skin microbiome, however, it reached a point, and again, there are specific brands that I can discuss. They have already reached a certain point in their research where they realize, I think this is the best that we can do, to be honest with you, right? Because there's been so much interest in it and there was so much money put into it about 8 years ago. And so those findings and discoveries are already in a little bottle. That's the good thing. Unfortunately now,
that's great.
That's great. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
We have to support these brands for that reason. What's the problem? In order to continue doing research, much more money needs to be put into the space. And we have already entered probably a year ago, maybe a little bit more, a very dry spell. And so I don't think that we're going to be seeing huge strides being made in the skin or scalp microbiome space because of the amount of money and investing that needs to happen. Okay. So We're always looking, the shiny object syndrome, right? We always want like the new thing. Well, we don't need something new because we already have them here in a way.
I love that.
Yes. It's a shame though, because there's still so much to discover. There's so much that we don't know. Like so much, it's not even funny. Like I could blow your mind just telling you some research that hasn't been published that I got honor to actually see directly from the people that have been in this space for a long time at the last skin microbiome meeting in Miami. And it would just blow your mind. It just makes you think we know nothing about human health. And so it's going to take some time, maybe another 5 to 10 years. Hopefully I'll be around.
Yes, of course. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
You have taught and shared with me so much valuable information, and I am beyond grateful. And I can't wait to actually go back now and do some research and figure out, the hair cleaning, not the shampooing. And looking at my water, you've inspired me. I used to have a water tester. I need to go buy a water tester.
Okay.
Test the water of the things that are coming out of the faucet, right? Or the shower head.
That's exactly right.
I think that's important. There's so much that I've learned from you. And
I'm glad.
as we wrap up here, Dr. Andrea Echeverry, I want to know where can people find you and learn more? Because I follow you and I sure do learn a lot. So where can everyone find you?
I'm glad to hear. And so if somebody's interested in, they're already too bold, right? And they want to learn more about scalp micropigmentation, my company is called Hair Pigment Center. I have multiple locations available to me on the East Coast, from Puerto Rico, Florida to Atlanta. And that's hairpigmentcenter.com. You can submit your information through the form. There's 3 forms: people that have had hair transplants, people that are completely shaven and bald. And then there's the hair regrowth component, which of course I welcome everybody to submit their information for me to review it and see if you are the ideal candidate for me to work. I am on all social media platforms. Just be mindful that because I work one-on-one with clients with very, like the tattoo, for example, is 4 or 5 hours sometimes. I almost exclusively use YouTube and Instagram right now. I know a lot of young people, that's actually an issue that I'm having right now. A lot of young people are staying away from social media because it affects their mental health. And so by submitting and going directly to the website and submitting their contact info, then you're going to get exclusive access to the things that I can provide without you having to jump on a social media platform that you find that is not as healthy for your mental health. So I am mindful of that because it is happening.
That's a beautiful thing.
Yes.
Beautiful thing. Well, thank you so much for being on Happiness Habitat. So grateful to have had this experience with you. For everyone, please go check out Dr. Andrea Echeverry. I will put all of the information in the show description. So thank you again. Bye for now.
Bye.